1. I lived in an active house for about 12 years, and I never experienced anything like this before or since. A bit of background. I've had what I'll call super dreams my entire life. Incredibly realistic dreams of places or events precognitive or of people departed. I recognize these dreams as something more than just the typical random, drifting dream. There's definitely something real going on. So with that little bit of background, I began having these dreams where I'd be sitting at a table, across from my then wife, and she'd be berating me. Just saying the most hurtful, derogatory, insulting things imaginable. Just verbally destroying me to the point where in the dream, I can't see past the tears. All I could say was, why? Why are you doing this to me? It only seemed to amuse her, and increase the severity of her verbal attacks. I'd wake up in tears. The dream would set my entire day off. These dreams would occur every few weeks. I got to the point where I began to question if my wife really thought these things. It really started to have a negative impact on my life. I became depressed and started to withdraw from my wife and my family. I started to wonder if she really felt or thought that way about me. Then the sleep paralysis started. I never experienced sleep paralysis before, and it was terrifying. Felt like something was holding me down, and there was a noise and a feeling associated with it. Like a vibration. During one sleep paralysis episode, I woke up in my stomach. I'm a side sleeper. My previous sleep paralysis episodes occurred while laying on my back, and it felt like something was trying to attach itself, like around my spine. This vibration, just an overwhelming sense that something was trying to enter me. I began to fight, sheer will to resist. I snapped out of it, but I honestly felt that I had just been in a real fight for my life, like something had tried to possess me. So fast forward a bit, a few more bouts of sleep paralysis and the berating nightmare until this one dream. I was in a hallway where she started to come at me and started screaming at me, hurling insults. But this was different than the table dreams, and I noticed something different about her. Something was off, and I recognized it wasn't her. I got pissed and confronted it. Who are you? You aren't my wife. Who are you? It seemed surprised by this and paused for a moment, but then came at me again hurling insults. No, you aren't my wife. Who are you? Then for some reason I started yelling, "What's your name?" It changed. It became scared and started to back away. But I was pissed and I started walking towards it, ready to fight. Who are you? What's your name? It began to panic and shifted into this shadowy, dark mass and turned to get away. And I went after it, demanding to know its name. It disappeared into a dark corner, like there was a door there or something, but it got away. I woke up and I knew this thing, this entity, was responsible for what I was going through. The berating dreams and the sleep paralysis. It all stopped after this. We moved out of that house several years ago, and shortly after the move, it appeared again in my dream. I immediately recognized it, and I distinctly remember saying, "Really? You're going to try this again?" That was the last encounter. I believe this thing was attacking me emotionally and spiritually in an attempt to weaken me so it could attach itself or even possibly possess me. I've been on a journey since this to try and learn or get some answers as to what happened or what's going on, but more importantly, I wanted to share in case someone else has experienced or is experiencing something similar. Thank you for your time. 2. This story is real. This happened to me when I was a kid. Just remembering this, my eyes get full of tears and I start to have goosebumps. Between the ages of 5 and 8 years old, I used to suffer night terrors. I thought that it was caused because my parents tend to argue, screaming at each other a lot. I slept in my room, a really small room with only space for a bed, a little desk and a small closet. The room had a rectangle shape and there was one item in every corner. In the one to the left, it is the door. I can remember very clearly how every night when I was in my bed trying to sleep, some kind of whispering in my ear that would increase in tone until it became a scream. Instead of waking me up, the scream started my nightmare. The nightmare always starts the same way. I'm alone in a huge black field with a black sky and no lights, with nothing around me but a small house made of stone bricks and a little window. I always walk inside the house from the front door and get out from the back door. Walking out the back door, I saw the skyline of a tall building that looked totally destroyed. After that, a huge fireball comes to me with the same whispering. As the fireball gets closer, the whisper becomes a scream again. This time, the scream wakes me up, and in front of me, inside my room in real life, there is a woman in the same corner where the closet is, looking at me. The woman seems to be totally wet, like she just got out of a storm. Her long black hair is covering her face, and she wears a long green coat. None of my parents are able to see her when they come after hearing me scream in terror, but the woman stays there, looking at me while my mother is hugging me. The nightmare repeated so many times during those years, but what gives me goosebumps is how they stopped. It was a sunny day of summer. During the morning, I was going with my mum to the supermarket to buy groceries. The supermarket was inside the city, a European city. My mum stopped by to chat with a friend in the street. I was looking around, and just at the other side of the street, separated by one road, I was able to see that woman again. I do not remember why, but I let go of my mother's hand, trying to go to that woman. When I was crossing the road, a car hit me, and I just remember waking up in the hospital with the doctor checking my legs. I was okay. After this incident, I never had night terrors or saw that woman again. I just wanted to share this with you because maybe someone has went through something similar. 3. This happened in 2017. A friend of mine, Julie, was going on vacation for 2 weeks and needed a pet sitter for her elderly dog. A mutual friend, Nathan, offered to stay at Julie's house and pet sit for the first week, and I took the second week. Several odd things happened to me during my week at Julie's house. The first odd encounters was a knocking sound at night in the guest bedroom, where I was sleeping. I would get in bed, and as soon as I'd turn off the lamp on the bedside table, a knocking sound would start. It sounded like it was coming from inside the wall at the head of the bed. It wasn't very loud, and it wasn't constant or rhythmic either. The other side of that wall is inside the house, not outside, so it wasn't the wind blowing a tree or shrub against the house. And there wasn't anything on the other side of the wall that could have been moving or rocking to cause the noise. If I turned the bedside lamp on, the noise would stop. If I turned the lamp back off, the noise would start again. The first night I chose to chalk it up to some kind of plumbing noise. I told myself that I didn't know enough about the noises to know all of the things that might cause noises, so I shouldn't worry about it. I put in earplugs and went to sleep. The next morning I remembered what had happened, so I intentionally spent time in that room during the day, with the bedside lamp on and off, to see if the noise would happen again. It didn't. But then that night it started up again as soon as I turned the lamp off. I gave up in that bedroom and slept in the master bedroom instead. The second odd occurrence was in the guest bathroom. I was taking a shower and knew that I wanted to put the washcloth I was using in the dirty laundry, instead of just rinsing it and hanging it up to use again. So after I finished washing myself, I wrung out the washcloth, opened up the shower curtain, tossed the washcloth on the bathroom floor right next to the shower, and closed the shower curtain back. I finished up showering and opened the shower curtain all the way to step out of the shower. I expected to see the wadded up washcloth on the floor where I'd left it, but instead it was neatly laid out flat in the middle of the bathroom rug, at least a foot from where I had tossed it. Something had moved it and neatly spread it out on the rug. It did not land like that when I tossed it out of the shower. It simply did not. The third occurrence, I am tempted to just dismiss as a draft in the house, but I will include it anyway. In the kitchen, my friend had one of those upright stand-alone paper towel holders. I was standing in the kitchen and suddenly the paper towels started to unravel. This is something I've seen happen in my own house if the paper towel holder is under an air conditioner vent and the air conditioner kicks on. But this was different, because there weren't any vents or fans nearby, and instead of the paper towels just gently unraveling a little bit, they unraveled several paper towels worth, if that makes sense, and with more force. I was a little spooked at this point, but I couldn't just abandon Julie's dog, so I basically pushed these odd events to the back of my mind. I experienced a lot of violence as a child, and I think my brain is really good at just filing things away until I'm in a safe place somewhere else and can actually think about and process what happened. Does anyone else's brain help them in this way? Now, for the fourth weird occurrence. This happened in the master bedroom, which hadn't given me any trouble until the second to last night I was there. This bedroom had an overhead ceiling fan light that was controlled by a light switch by the door, and there were lamps on the bedside tables. The ceiling fan light was on, and the lamp in my side of the bed was off. I wanted to get into bed, and I was too lazy to turn the lamp on, and then walked back to switch the light to turn off the ceiling fan light. There was a direct path from the light switch to the side of the bed I was sleeping on, so I switched off the light switch and walked to the bed in the dark, where I turned on the bedside lamp. The thing is, on my way to the bed, something heavy and cold, it felt metallic, hit me in the middle of my forehead. In the moment, I thought I had walked into the pull chain hanging down from the ceiling fan. This had happened to me before in my own house, but when I turned on the bedside lamp and looked back, I saw that there was no pull chain hanging down from the ceiling fan. There was just a very short chain that in no way could have reached my head when I walked under the fan. The fifth odd occurrence happened the final night I was there. I just lay down in bed in the now spooky master bedroom. I wanted to just pass out so the morning would come and I could leave. Suddenly a loud crashing noise came from the living room. It sounded like someone had stacked a huge pile of furniture in the living room and then pushed it over. Big, loud, prolonged crashing noise. I froze. I wasn't sure what to do, because there was nothing in the living room that could have possibly fallen over and made that kind of sound, yet I definitely heard it. I looked over at my friend's dog, who was sound asleep and didn't seem to have heard a thing. I wondered if maybe the noise had come from outside. Maybe something on the porch had fallen over, or maybe a neighbor had dumped a huge load of recycling into the recycling bin, and my brain interpreted it as something else, since I was already freaked out from being in that house. Then I worried that someone had broken in. I just lay there for a while, afraid to move. After everything had been quiet for a while, I got up and peeked out into the living room. Nothing. It was just as I had left it. Nothing fallen over, everything neat and tidy. I walked through the entire house and the garage and didn't see anything that could have possibly explained the crashing noise. I didn't want to go outside and creep myself out any further, so I locked myself and the dog in the master bedroom and eventually fell asleep. The next morning, I walked around the outside of the house and didn't see anything that could explain the crashing noise. When I got home, I honestly forgot about my experiences at Julie's house. I think my brain was just a bit tired and traumatized, and pushed everything to the back to be dealt with later. The next time I hung out with Nathan, the person who had pet sat for the first week, everything came back to me, and I asked if he had any odd experiences in Julie's house. He hadn't. For the first time, I talked about everything that had happened to me at her house, and he was surprised and confused by all of it. I never pet sat for Julie again. I have been back to her house multiple times, but only during the day for short visits, and nothing odd has ever happened during those visits. I never told her about my odd experiences because she has to live in that house, and I didn't want to scare her. And we are very close, so I know she would have told me about any strange experiences she had. I concluded that something or someone wasn't happy about me staying in that house. I decided to just let it be and not involve her. 4. So the house I grew up in was most definitely haunted. My parents bought the land from a farmer, and we built and are the only ones to live in the house. It was a huge house on 5 acres of land that backed up to the woods. For years we never had issues until my dad finished the basement. He turned the basement into a big movie room on one side and a workout and game room on the other. Obviously, my brothers and I started spending a lot of time down there, because it was like our own private movie theater. The lights down there would sometimes randomly flicker, but we all chalked that up to bad wiring because my dad did it himself. Occasionally, the TV would change channels while we were in the middle of a movie, and it would always change to some sort of kids channel, Cartoon Network, Disney, Nickelodeon. This led to a lot of sibling fights and blaming each other for sitting on the remote. After that happened a few times, we started setting the remotes on the table in the middle of the room. But the TV would still change channels. At this point, my siblings and I were convinced something was down there, but my parents kept ignoring it. Once, when I was about 10, I had just gotten home from school and was home alone. I was being a good child and started doing my chores, one of which was cleaning out my hamster's cage. I was walking out to the garage with the cage in one arm, hamster and her ball in the other arm, when I heard the front door open and slam shut, and stomping footsteps going up the stairs. This was weird because no one ever used our front door. Everyone went through the garage. I called out thinking it was one of my brothers, but got no answer. I set my hamster down to go check the door. It was still locked. I panicked, grabbed the house phone, and called my mom while I sprinted to our neighbor's house. My mom rushed home from work and found no one was there, and we still can't explain what happened. Another time, my best friend and neighbor and I decided to camp out in my front yard. We were about 11 and too scared to go into the woods alone. We'd just gotten our tent all set out with sleeping bags and lanterns, and just lay down to read some magazines as the sun went down. Suddenly, we hear what sounded like a little girl singing. We both stop reading and stare at each other, trying to think of who that could be, because we were the only young girls that lived in the neighborhood. The sounds started coming closer and sounded like it was right outside of our tent. We both got chills and goosebumps. We both screamed and sprinted inside as fast as we could without looking back. I can still hear the sound of that singing to this day. Nothing creepy happened for a few years after that, just the typical lights flicker and channels changing. Then, when I was 14, I had my volleyball team over for a sleepover. A few of them knew about the ghost haunting my house, so they brought a Ouija board for the night. Of course, I had to do it and find out who was haunting my family. First try, almost as soon as our fingers touched the planchette, it started moving. We asked typical questions like, "What's your name? Are you going to hurt us? Why are you here?" And we only got no as our answer to those. I then asked, "Are you a little girl?" The planchette moved to yes. "Did you live in this land before me?" Her answer was yes. "How did you die?" And she spelled out Fire on the board just after that. One of my friends freaked out and knocked the board over, saying that someone touched her shoulder. My friends and I tried to look up if anything happened on the property before my family bought it. We did find out that there was a barn fire, years before we bought the land, but the daughter of the family who owned it grew up and moved away. We couldn't find anything about a girl dying in the fire. My dad sold the house years later, but my brothers and I were talking about it recently, and I told them what happened with the Ouija board. One of my brothers freaked out and said it made so much sense. One night he fell asleep in the basement and woke up in the middle of the night. He saw a little girl standing in the doorway. He thought it was me, so he just said, "Go away," and went back to sleep, only to realize the next morning that I was at a friend's house for a sleepover. I don't know if the new owners have had any similar experiences since living there. I'm just thankful that as far as ghost encounters go, our ghost was pretty harmless. 5. My passion for the paranormal started over 20 years ago. I was just a teenager, and my stepdad had died of cancer. I lived in a different state and didn't get the chance to say goodbye. I went over to my sister's house to watch my nephew. It was his nap time, so I placed him in his crib and walked down the hall to the living room. From the couch, I could see him in his room. I was really tired and decided I would take a nap while he was taking one. I was in that half-awake state, and I kept hearing him jumping up and down in his crib and laughing. I was so tired, but sat up and said, "Please go to sleep for Auntie." As I lay my head back down, I was almost asleep, and heard a grown man whistling really loud. It was a quick tune, but it was loud. My nephew was staring at something and laughing. I completely panicked and froze in fear as I thought someone broke in. I ran down the hall to protect my nephew, and there was no one else in the room. I ran outside until a friend could come over. When I made it back in the house and made sure no one was there, I started to explain the details to my friend. I took my nephew back to his room to change his diaper. As I was changing him, he pointed towards his closet door and said, "Papa." He called my stepdad Papa. This experience brought me so much comfort, knowing that our loved ones are still with us after they pass. For many years after the experience, I looked for more. I wanted more validation from more experiences and from the experiences of others. In my early 20s, my husband and I had met a couple through his work that seemed interested in the paranormal as I was. One of the haunted places in my town was the obvious, a cemetery. The cemetery was right next to an asylum and many other state buildings that had well-lit parking lots. My friend and her husband picked me up one night after work to go to this cemetery for our first ghost hunt, as there were many stories about this specific area. It was late, and as we started through the cemetery path, it felt as if there were spider webs brushing across my face. Not much happened for a while until we walked to the back towards the mausoleum. There were trees and ivy with a small dirt hill that had a little path, with nothing more at the end but a chain-linked fence. On the other side of the fence was one of the state buildings with light coming from the parking lot. My friend and I noticed what we thought was a security guard, walking along the chain-link fence on the cemetery side. With the light from the parking lot and the darkness from the cemetery, I couldn't make out features other than his bulky uniform and hat. He wasn't facing me and was pointing a flashlight towards the ground, swaying it back and forth as if looking for something. I was at the top of the ivy patch, looking down towards him, waiting to be busted for being in a cemetery past dusk. He made an abrupt stop, did a military about-face maneuver, and raised his flashlight at us in a mechanical fashion. I still saw no features. I knew by the movement it wasn't a security guard. I never thought when I saw my first ghost it would look solid and real. I honestly don't know what else it could have been. Although a little jarring, it is what I was looking for. I will always have a passion for the paranormal, as I know from experience there is so much more out there. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Paranormal Stories, episode 314. Please press the like button before you go. A quick click helps out the channel greatly. Okay, let's see. I don't think there's any other business today, so let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is... We're going to gravitate back toward the food-themed ones for a sec. And this question comes from one of my moderators, Venikins, so thank you very much, Venikins. Yes, I'm running out of questions after hundreds and hundreds of videos. And today's question is, how do you enjoy eating fries, or chips as we call them in my country? Because that's what they're called. I like to have mine with, I like to do them like poor man's poutine style, which is, there's like cubes of cheese and then gravy with some Worcestershire sauce and maybe whatever else in it. Very yummy. I also like curry sauce with them, or sometimes just salt and vinegar, because that's also very, very yummy. But you may have other wacky ideas. There might be other ways. I don't know what other way you could possibly eat them, but I'm willing to learn and willing to try new ideas. So let me know how you enjoy them in a comment below. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.